Digitalization of life has accelerated the development of society, education, and culture. But access to modern ideas and sciences begins with reading, and to read, one needs a clear and comprehensible writing system. Assalamu alaikum, this is Finn. Today we'll talk about why Azerbaijanis adopted the Latin script and what path it went through. At the end, the traditional question. Getti. The widespread belief that Azerbaijanis first encountered the Latin script in the 1990s is incorrect. As early as the mid-19th century, Mirza Ali Akhundzade began advocating for reforming the Arabic alphabet and later for transitioning Muslims to a modern Western writing system. The reason was simple. Learning the Arabic script was long and difficult. Akhundzade recalled that it took him almost 4 years to learn to read. Most Arabic letters looked similar and differed only by dots. One mistake with a dot and the child could no longer recognize the word. This slowed education for both men and women. Azerbaijani phonetics also didn't fit well with Arabic writing. The language has vowel harmony, hard vowels and soft vowels. For example, if a root contains a hard vowel, the ending must also contain a hard vowel for easier pronunciation. Using the same vowel group requires less effort. In Arabic script, however, most vowels were not written, even though they were pronounced. Akhundzade proposed marking both short and long vowels, which would significantly simplify reading. He presented his reformed version of the Arabic script in Persia and the Ottoman Empire, but his initiatives were rejected. In his view, the issue wasn't the alphabet itself, but the unwillingness to change the existing order and the privileged position of the ruling dynasty, officials, and clergy. As a result, Akhundzade called for completely abandoning Arabic script in favor of Latin. His version included 32 consonants and 10 vowels, was written from left to right, and allowed the writer to leave the pen while writing. Thanks to his efforts, later generations of intellectuals supported the idea of switching to Latin. Hasan Bey Zardabi, Nariman Narimanov, and Jan Ahmet Kuluzade, although the latter continued publishing his famous satirical magazine Molla Nasreddin in Arabic script. By the time of the Azerbaijani Democratic Republic, a draft of the new alphabet had already been developed and published. After the formation of the Azerbaijan SSR, the issue of Latinization became particularly relevant. This coincided with the USSR's policy of supporting national culturists, although opponents of Latinization outside Azerbaijan believed that the Arabic script helped preserve unified literary norms for all Turkic peoples. For example, the Volga Tatars preferred a simplified Arabic alphabet after the establishment of Soviet rule, and Kazakhs who migrated to China still use it in writing today. Nevertheless, in 1925, Latin began to be used in parallel with Arabic script, and by 1928, a law on a full transition to Latin was adopted. The results were impressive. While only a quarter of the population was literate in 1926, by 1933, literacy had doubled. Akhundzade proved to be right. At the same time, Turkey was also considering a writing reform. In 1928, Atatürk officially introduced the Latin alphabet and banned Arabic script. This brought Turkey and Azerbaijan closer together, but increased cultural differences with Iranian Azerbaijan, where such reforms were impossible to discuss. In 1933, a unified Turkic alphabet, Yan Alif, was introduced for all Turkic languages of the USSR. However, by the late 1930s, the situation changed. The USSR abruptly abandoned the policy of Korenizatsiya, industrialization began, and it became inconvenient for the central authorities to manage dozens of different writing systems. An external factor was also added: uncertainty over Turkey's position in the pre-war years. Atatürk, a partner of the USSR, had died by then, but the linguistic closeness between Turkey and the Turkic peoples of USSR, especially Azerbaijanis, remained. In 1940, Azerbaijan was officially switched to Cyrillic. This affected government paperwork, the activities of public organizations, the periodical press, and school education. Cyrillic remained in use until 2001. Outside Azerbaijan, it is still used today, for example, among Azerbaijanis in Dagestan, Russian Federation. The revival of the Latin script in 1991, after restoring independence, Azerbaijan returned to the Latin alphabet. The current version was approved in 1992 and finalized in 2001. The day of the national alphabet was also established that year. The modern alphabet consists of 32 letters. It was declared that this step would strengthen national identity, promote integration into the international community, and symbolically separate the country from its Soviet past. However, there were also practical reasons. First, Latin is better suited to the structure of the Azerbaijani language. The principle, one sound, one letter, fits perfectly with vowel harmony. This is more difficult to achieve in Cyrillic. While Cyrillic represented Azerbaijani phonetics better than Arabic script, it still fell short of Latin. For example, the Russian letter Y can represent either one or two sounds in Azerbaijani Latin based on the phonetic features of the language. This problem doesn't exist. For instance, in Uzbekistan, the transition to Latin also began in the early 1990s, but a complete transition has still not been achieved. Both Cyrillic and Latin are used. Phonetically, Uzbek has only 6 vowels, and its vowel system is closer to Persian than to Turkic. The second reason was the gradual outflow of part of the Russian-speaking population, especially in cities, which meant fewer people dependent on Cyrillic. It began on the eve of and immediately after the collapse of the USSR and was completed just as Cyrillic officially ceased to be used. For comparison, in Kazakhstan, another Turkic-speaking country with a much larger Russian-speaking population, the transition to Latin has been ongoing for 3 decades and has not yet been completed. Although several versions of the Latin alphabet have been proposed, the percentage of people proficient in Kazakh is growing, as is the number of Kazakh language schools. Third, Azerbaijan's geographical position determines its cultural and political proximity to Turkey, where Latin script had been successfully implemented. Linguistic similarity and cultural and economic integration made Latin a natural choice for Azerbaijan as well. And finally, political independence. For example, the Volga Tatars' attempt to switch to Latin in the late 20th century was halted by a Russian federal law declaring Cyrillic the only official script. Azerbaijan, being independent, was able to implement its own choice. Choosing Latin was not a matter of fashion. It was an optimal decision based on historical, linguistic, and political factors. This doesn't mean that the Latin alphabet is better or worse than others. It simply suits Azerbaijan best. This August marks a quarter of a century since the official celebration of Azerbaijani Alphabet Day, a national writing system that went through a long and difficult formation process lasting more than 150 years. How practical and viable is the idea of a unified alphabet for Turkic-speaking peoples? What are your arguments for and against? Subscribe, hit the like button, ring the bell, leave a comment and share with your friends. By the way, this video is also available in Russian, and as always, remember, there is no good or bad culture, only a different one. Salamat kalın.